Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast. My name is Ben Lister. Welcome along to the Radio Legends podcast, episode 20. Here today in this series, as you know, I chat with the icons of radio about their career, their life in the radio industry, and in the world of wireless. So let's meet today's contestant. From the Midlands, it's broadcasting legend, Mr. Tim Rodgers. Hello, Tim. Welcome along.
Well, I'm not sure I've been called an icon before, but that's an interesting start. Yes. Hello, Ben. Nice to be with you.
How are you today, sir?
Yes, I'm fine. Got a bit of a cough. So if the throat gives out at some point, please bear with me. But apart from that, all is good and busy.
Good. Good. Welcome. Yeah, that's good. We're here to chat about your broadcast career, if that's okay. 6 questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, fire ahead.
Okay, let's go for it. Question 1. Where did you start your broadcast career?
Well, I joined Radio Trent in Nottingham in 1975, December 1975. And I was in the advertising department to begin with, but actually first went on air in 1979. I think it was the week that John Wayne died. I always remember that. And it was June 1979.
That's good. And what was the first show you did?
Well, I was fortunate because I like all sorts of music, and my record collection would sort of back that up. The thing that I got closest to over the years was country music, and around about 1979, the program controller at the time, a guy called Bev Smith, sadly no longer with us, lovely guy, and he took me to one side. He said, "Well, look, there's a lot of guys at Radio Trent that I've offered the country music show to, because we're starting to do specialist music shows. And I got a problem because no one knows much about country music. And also no one seems to want to do it. And so, would you?" So it went on. It'd been going for a few months, I think, actually, with different presenters, one of which actually was Dale Winton, as it happens, who did like country music, but he was that busy with his daytime show that he didn't have the time to put into it. So I ended up with the show, and like I say, it was called Sounds Country, and it was first aired in June 1979, like I say, the week that John Wayne died, the actor. So I always remember that.
Did you play any country or western music as a tribute to John Wayne?
Well, funnily enough, I think John Wayne, there's a couple of things here. John Wayne actually did like country music, but I didn't play a country song as such for him, but I did play, I think, in the early part of the program, the theme from one of his big movies, one of his big westerns. But the irony was that years and years and years later, in fact, probably about 3 years ago, I was doing some interviews at a big event in London, a big country event, a festival called C2C at the O2 Arena. And I actually met his granddaughter, who was a member of a country band and a trio called Runaway June. So I got to talk about John Wayne, obviously her grandfather, and the fact that I'd started my program the week that he died. So quite a nice little link there.
Brilliant. Question 2. Who were your inspirations in your broadcast career when you were starting out at Radio Trent?
Well, I listened to Trent. I mean, I worked there since 75 when it first opened. And I just loved all the presenters we had. But I think as a child, I would remember being given a little transistor radio. Only had medium wave on it, I think, at the time. But I used to listen to all the pirate stations or Radio Luxembourg. I'd lap that sort of stuff up, and I'd be listening to people like Kenny Everett and Dave Lee Travis, Tony Blackburn. And, these were just icons. I remember being on the beach at Frinton on Sea in Essex. And I had my little transistor radio in my hand, and I was listening to it. And there was Radio Caroline out at sea, and I could see the ship that I was listening to. And, that's a magical experience. Well, it was a magical experience for, I think I was 11 at the time. So that was my inspiration, really, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. What was it like working at the legendary Radio Trent Underground area then, with legends such as Len Grote, Dale Winton, Mr. Lloyd?
Well, it was funny, really, because I had worked in other lines of business over the years, but I'd always been involved with entertainment. And when I joined Radio Trent, it was like the job of a lifetime, really. And I just wanted to carry on because it got me nearer to what I wanted to be associated with. And that was music, basically. So being given the opportunity, to work at a radio station, albeit on the advertising front and the promotion front, that was a terrific kick. And then just a couple of so years later, to be asked to do a radio program for music I felt I understood and thoroughly enjoyed, that was just beyond belief. And I'm still doing it now. So, I mean, I learned so many lessons from the presenters at Trent, little tricks of the trade from people like John Peters, who is still a friend of mine, and a few others as well. It was a great experience. And I think what you had to do was just keep your ears open and your eyes open and just lap it all up and soak it all in. And then you couldn't really go wrong.
You haven't been invited onto the boom yet.
Well, I don't think country music is part of their remit, to be honest with you. I think country music's got a very obvious place in the scheme of things. I mean, I'm on a couple of really big country stations in the UK, one being Country Line Radio and another one called CMR Nashville. And that's about as big as you can get over here in terms of totally country stations. But I think what Boom does is pretty much what I experienced when I worked at Saga Radio, which was, paying tribute to a lot of the classic sounds in pop over the years from maybe the 50s onwards. So at this point, I'm not sure that country music's got a place there. Who knows? Could change. That does happen.
Who knows? You could get that golden phone call from Mr. Lloyd one day.
Well, if he does, knowing David, he'd reverse the charges.
Question 3, what is your favourite part about the job?
The favourite part, I think, whereas a lot of radio stations, the presenters are told what to play these days, for me, it's always pretty well been my choice. It's a bit like being in the position that John Peel was in for many years. The show was his music, basically, what he thought ought to be played. And I think that's a big part of what I enjoy about it still, just, having 2 hours to fill with music that I feel has got value to it, either something from the past or maybe one of the new names that's coming up now. And that's another big part of the job that I do. I feel you're almost like duty bound to keep your eyes and ears open for the new talent coming up. And there's some marvelous stuff out there. So discovering new names to play. Years ago, back in the 80s, I went to Nashville about 18 times. And took a producer with me, a guy you might know called Alan Bailey, who was responsible for all the commercials at Radio Trent and also producing the Monty Python albums. And he worked at Radio Luxembourg. So he's a good friend to have, he knows his stuff. So we're sitting in the press room waiting for someone to turn up for an interview. And a publicist tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, I've got a young guy here who we think is going to be really big. You might not have heard of him, but I think, it'd be great if you could talk to him. And I said, what's his name? And they said, Garth Brooks. Now, not very often in one's radio career do you meet an Elvis, someone who literally takes over and dominates a music genre. And Garth Brooks, he's certainly done that. He's outsold most of the big names in pop music around the world. And he's almost got that Elvis sort of stature and still going strong, I have to say as well. Now, I knew Garth for many years, and we go out to Nashville and we get invited over to his office for tea in the afternoon and cakes and things like that. So, that was a great experience.
That's good. Brilliant. That's it for part 1. So join me in a bit for part 2. But for now, back to the studio. Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with broadcaster Tim Rodgers. 3 more questions, if that's okay, Tim.
Yep, throw them at me. I'll try and be honest.
Let's go for it. Question 4. What is your greatest radio moment?
Well, since 1979, there've just been so many memories that I've got, and moments, if you like. I suppose, for years you go into a studio and do your 2 or 3 hour show and hope that it's done correctly to the best of your ability. And then I think when someone or an organization come to you and say, well, we'll give you an award because we appreciate, what you've done, then it's great. And now and then that happens. And for me, I got the International Broadcasters Award from the Country Music Association in America back in 2007. And that was a tremendous recognizing of my work, I suppose, for country music. That was a great honor. So probably that is the biggest honor I've had, one of the biggest moments too.
Brilliant. How do you think the last 2 years has affected the radio landscape, in your opinion, and you personally?
Well, it's a difficult thing to say. I think radio has had to become a different animal. I think, I don't want to get into the politics of the whole thing, but I think the radio I grew up with has changed radically. It's not the big influence it used to be, when you take on all those commercial radio stations that people used to relate to, or even stations like Radio Luxembourg. But I think what has happened is that people have to be a bit clever on how they broadcast. And like a lot of other people, I stopped going into a studio and built my own, if you like. And I produce programs from my studio, as a lot of other presenters have had to do. It was quite strange because just before the pandemic, for about 1.5 years, I was working with the BBC up in Lincolnshire and doing a Monday night show, which was really enjoyable. And to sit in an air-conditioned studio for 2 hours with some great equipment at your fingertips to use, that was wonderful. Unfortunately, that came to a grinding halt with the onset of the pandemic because they just couldn't let people into the station. So sadly, the program ground to a halt. But I think we've had to be a lot more resourceful. There's still a need for radio. And I think doing country music there are so many people doing that now, of all different types and qualities as well. But I think you just do what you think's right. And the pandemic was a bit of an obstacle, but we got around it and we're still doing it.
Do you ever think, what's your favourite country music song that helped you through the last two pandemic?
Well, that's difficult to say. I wouldn't say that any particular one song has really had that effect. I think what has happened with me is just at a time when one could have given up, you thought, well, no, there's still a market for what I do. And there's about 35 stations throughout the world who want what I do, plus the 2 country stations I mentioned. So it's worth continuing, and I can do it very easily. I've got the time and the enthusiasm and health and energy to do it. So I don't think it's been one big song that would, I could use as an example of something that kept me going. I think the music generally, the desire to sort of think of these great oldies from the 60s onwards, in some cases earlier, that you still feel people want to hear, and searching out new talent, that's never left me. I've always enjoyed doing that. So that's what's kept me going, probably.
Brilliant. And my last question on the list is, what advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out at the bottom of the broadcast ladder?
Whoa, that's a tricky one. I don't know, just give it your best, really give it your best. There's a lot of people out there with advice, but I think the best thing in life is to really look at what you do. Can I improve it? Analyze it, listen to what you do as a broadcaster, and keep an ear to the ground on what people want to hear, whether it be, oldies or current trends or whatever. Just keep up to date with it. There's a lot of great stuff out there. But I think overall, just do your best and make it sound good. And you're an entertainer. Remember that one as well. You're not just playing records. You are, in effect, an entertainer. And that's what you should think of. Think of your audience when you open up that fader on your microphone.
Brilliant. That's it for today. We are out of time. Thank you for joining us, Tim.
My pleasure.
And thank you to you people out there, sir, for joining me today. So please give it up one more time for Mr. Tim Radio Trent Rodgers.
Thank you, Ben. Good luck.
Thank you very much for watching. This will be available on my YouTube channel in video form and my wix.com website in audio form, and maybe one day on a radio station near you. Thanks very much for joining me, watching, listening, wherever you are in the world. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Until next time, that's a wrap, and back to the studio.